Now, let's get started. As mentioned, I'm an AVP at BWF. I have a really strong background in arts and culture fundraising. I've also spent time fundraising for healthcare and education. I have nearly 20 years of fundraising experience. And then prior to joining BWF, I partnered with them with several arts and culture institutions. We partnered together to introduce fundraising analytics in the arts, and as a result, the project with BWF was featured on the cover of the Chronicle of Philanthropy. So it is with pleasure that we join you here today. I also want to introduce my co-host today. Wendy Jacquard is a AVP at BWF, where she specializes in systems, operations, and business process definition. Wendy has over 25 years of experience in nonprofit fundraising and has worked with federal, national, and international nonprofits, ACC, Big Ten, Ivy League, Canadian institutions of higher education, as well as healthcare clients, small colleges, and secondary education organizations. She's also worked in a Salesforce practice for nonprofits as a principal consultant, serving as technical lead, among other roles, with a variety of nonprofits and higher education clients. She has 15 years of experience with Blackbaud implementations and business process improvement projects. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So for this first part of the webinar, what I wanted to mention is that with special events, we are all in this together. Every single nonprofit that is struggling right now has been impacted. And so I just wanted to give you a quick scope and overview of what's happening in a couple of the major cities, mainly just to know that we are all struggling with these event cancellations together. The impact is nationwide. According to a recent article in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, 44% of charities have no plans to mitigate losses from canceled events. And 74% of nonprofits have adjusted their fundraising appeals to acknowledge the coronavirus. In New York City alone, nonprofits say they'll survive for now, but obviously nonprofits, bartenders, and planners and staff are struggling. There are revenue losses. But in a city that thrives on networking, and the costs in social and professional capital may be significant. The New York State's nonprofit sector employs more than 1.4 million people. Chicago, some nonprofits have postponed their fundraising galas. Some have taken a wait and see stance or moved to virtual events online. And the same goes for Houston, Texas as well, where I happen to be based. For virtual fundraising events, the reason I just wanted to talk about the landscape mainly is that just so that we all know that we're struggling with this across the country. So that's why we felt like this topic was really relevant. I wanted to give you a couple of great examples of virtual events that we've seen recently in the space. I spoke with a wonderful staff member at Arts Corp in Seattle. They were one of the first on the scene to do a virtual event. They transformed their gala in March and streamed it online via YouTube. It's a Seattle-based organization, arts organization that empowers teaching artists and provides access to arts education for students. The challenges they learned from making their virtual event, Festa 2020 virtual, was that they had to learn on their feet how to become video producers. They had to adjust their budget. A third of the individual giving was met, so they had to pivot and do current appeals to make up the rest of that fundraising. They did run into some audio troubles, and so they had reduced rehearsal time. So one big takeaway was, if you definitely are going to broadcast and go this route, that you need to put in budget in for some rehearsal time. And there's always a tension of how to get the maximum amount of people to tune in, as well as the timing of when you ask for a gift. A total of 120 gifts were received during this event. They used BidPal to text to give, and they repurposed the videos that they had already produced for their institution. So it made for a wonderful time for new people to learn about the institution. Some wonderful opportunities they found. So they were able to engage a younger audience. They were able to engage their teaching artists to act as social outreach during the event. And they became advocates for the institution interacting with the event. Now, keep in mind, teaching artists are not fundraisers, but they became fundraising advocates during this event. The ED, the executive director, gave a shout out to people who were live, and that created great interaction. There was a wonderful chat feature on YouTube that was utilized to create that engagement. And they were able to roll out some wonderful ways that programming has pivoted during this time. They were able to speak to that with their stakeholders. And the reach was so much broader than they've ever experienced, with people across the country and world tuning in. Another platform that's often used is Facebook Live. And with this particular event, they were able to have over 1,000 views, where prior postings on YouTube had not reached that. Also, I wanted to show an education example of MICC, or the Minnesota Independence College and Community, which is based in Minneapolis. What I love about their event webpage, if you go directly to their webpage, is that they have 3 videos. They have their gala video, which you see premiered here. They also have a testimonial video talking about how their nonprofit has impacted the folks that they serve. And then they have a campus tour, a video of a campus tour. I thought that was really effective. On their webpage, which you can see here at the bottom, miccommunity.org/gala, it clearly articulates the schedule of events, how you can participate. You had 2 options between donating and watching. There was an FAQ section and sponsor visibility with logos. And I believe, from what I heard, they did exceed their fundraising goal. And as you can see here in this one screenshot of the view, they did present it like it was, they were at the gala, dressed at their masquerade gala. And another option, as you can see here with Arts Corp, they decided to do their gala on site so that you could actually see the things that were where the action happens. And I'd like to call attention to those wonderful sanitary wipes that they show in the front there. Here's some other creative virtual event examples. Be the Match has clear messaging and creative participation of how you can couch to cure. You can donate or register to be a bone marrow donor. There's interactive postings on social media with from you posting from your couch. I love that the goals are present. As you can see, they've raised over $350,000. And then I also love this participation part, where they have a participation goal. So I think that this was highly effective. It's clean, and make sure that you're not putting too much information that's hard to digest for your donors. And then finally, one of my personal favorites is the Actors Fund. Seth Rudetsky of SiriusXM Broadway with his husband started the Stars in the House. It's a daily webcast where they actually talk with Broadway performers in their homes and stars, and nearly $160,000 has been raised from these Broadway casts. And you've actually seen some subsequent live casts just like this. The Rosie O'Donnell show came back for one day doing a similar mechanism. There's definitely been others I've seen that have repeated this, but Seth Rudetsky and Stars in the House was the first on the scene I had seen. The Actors Fund provides $250,000 in direct financial assistance to those in the theater and entertainment industry daily. What I love about Stars in the House is, besides being a huge theater geek myself, it was very creative. As I mentioned, they were the first on the scene. And as you can see here on the top of the screen, there's an auction component. They have asked these Broadway stars to auction off memorabilia from the shows that they've been in, and that has seemed to be really effective. And they've really gotten a lot of participation with that. So just a couple of things to keep in mind as you are trying to decide whether you're going to make your event virtual. You need to start with a strong fundraising base. you're going to want to have your sponsors, ticket buyers, and donors in hand. There's a couple of considerations you need to think about with these sponsors as you're approaching them. You may have already raised and had a significant sponsor base already, and you're going to request to repurpose those funds into a virtual event. As you approach your corporate donors, please think about some regional and sector considerations. As I mentioned, I'm down here in Houston, so oil prices have a significant effect on the corporate sponsorships down here. For your renewing and existing base, can ask those existing donors if they would consider 100% tax deduction versus refunding their full ticket. And for those that you're renewing, please encourage them to be a part of this event, and that their funding will go directly to services and business continuity of your institution. Use this as an opportunity to expand and diversify your donor base, as well as your followers. So you're going to also need a strong base of followers, as well as social media followers, as well as sponsors for your event. You'll need dedicated and active social media following that you could then harness and engage. And then for a new follower base, figure out which target audiences, who and which outlets you plan to target with your event. Next, you need to look at a strong infrastructure, create a digital event plan, multi-channel distribution. Think about things your plan should include a run of show, contingency planning. You need to adjust and refine your current content. Digital event plan should have budgeting, research and benchmarking of other similar events. Then talk about your stakeholders, the staff, volunteers, and vendors, and what their roles will look like in this new virtual event. Some examples is you can really engage your volunteer base to help with crowdfunding and advocating for your event, reaching out during the event, promoting your event. Decide if you're going to staff your virtual event in-house or if you're going to outsource it to a digital fundraising team. Technology, find reliable digital fundraising partners and solutions. You might think about a live donation or text to give software, an interactive event thermometer, digital donor wall. Make sure your Wi-Fi is very strong and reliable. Production aspects, think about repurposing videos you already have, and think about the cadence between pre-recorded content and live video content and what that looks like. Think about chat features. And then for your program, look at keynotes, awards, presentations, entertainment. Are you going to have celebrity appearances or a live band? Please note that those celebrity appearances or bands are still having fees for virtual engagement, so you'll need to factor that. Look at live or pre-recorded testimonials and remind the audience several times to donate throughout the auction. Also look at virtual auctions if that's a component of your event. And then finally, final considerations, additional efforts to make up the difference. If your goal is not met, what are those other fundraising efforts? Use this as an opportunity to combine your special events if you have been wanting to do that or collaborate with a partner organization on a special event. And then use this as a time that you will also look and talk with your vendors about how to, and will they be able to expense defer? Will their expense, can you defer that to another time if you decide to postpone your event? This is a time to also look at your contract details if you are canceling or postponing your event. Look at the force majeure clause, and as well as address any event insurance that you may have. And then look at legal implications if you are live streaming content. There's definitely things for rights to songs that you need to be aware of if you are live streaming that. And then event timing. Make sure new time and dates are avoiding any conflicts in your regional or area or city. And now I'm going to pass it over to Wendy to talk about some other digital solutions.
Okay, hey there. So, you know, what Amy just talked about was obviously if you want to if you probably already had an event in place and you want to move it to the virtual sphere, what are some things that you need to think about and what are some things that you need to do? it's a lot of work. So, and it takes a certain amount of coordination. So these are some other things that are options that are not quite the same level of effort, or that they can be used in conjunction with an event that you have turned into virtual to, because the challenge for everyone, especially if you're an event dependent kind of person for fundraising, is trying to figure out alternate means to try to make up what you may not have gotten because you're not having your event live. So one option is a giving day. This is, it's really a 24-hour, it can be longer than that depending, but it's a specific day that there's a real focus on and driving people to give. And I think probably everybody knows, has heard of a giving day. There's the National Giving Day, and then there are other institutions that are now having their own because of the situation that they're in. And so this is to help them make it through. So go ahead, Amy, you can, there we go. Okay, so there were 3 examples here that had, nice giving day pages. There's a, cause and cure example, higher ed, and then an arts example. And so for all of those, there are some things that you should take into consideration. Yes. Okay. So if you have already done this before and you already have a platform and a vendor, that's great. If you have not had your own giving day before, you definitely will need a software vendor and a platform to help you accomplish this. These are just some things to think about as you're talking to various vendors. How is the payment processing handled? How are you going to be able to report and see what's been given? How does the receipting work? If you get gifts offline during the giving day, how can you update the total so you can have the most up-to-date information for your people who are coming to view the site? How easy is it to use? Is it mobile ready so you can get people to be giving on their phones? And then how much is it going to cost? So those are things to think about when reviewing the giving day platforms. Other things to think about are very similar to the things that Amy was talking about for making an event virtual. It's really be thoughtful about setting your goals so that you have realistic goals, but because that's part of what you're driving people toward is this is the dollar amount that we'd like to bring in this period. You're messaging your case for giving, just to make sure that it's very clear, the sense of urgency and to compel people to have to want to give, picking a date, the considerations of what else is going on that date, the length of the day. So, an example that I was reading about was some organizations that have a more international base may want to have a 48-hour period that's technically their giving day to allow for the change in time zones and things like that. But 24 hours is a great one because it does help drive people to give, and it pushes that sense of urgency. How are you going to communicate with people after they gave, and then stewarding your donors? Okay, no, you're good. Okay, so there's also peer-to-peer and crowdfunding. And peer-to-peer, I'm sure most of you can think of examples of this or know of examples where there's a walkathon or a run where people can create teams and raise money on behalf of the organization for their participation in this event. And then crowdfunding is really a way to allow, again, people to participate and raise money for you, help raise money for you. So here are some examples that, the American Cancer Society Relay for Life and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cycle for Survival are some peer-to-peer fundraising examples. And, people have had to move to a more virtual participation. I saw a run where they were asking people to run at home and post how long they had run and what day as a replacement for actually showing up and taking part in the run on site. Habitat for Humanity has a really nice crowdfunding site there where there's a goal, the case is made for why to give. There are teams, it shows how much teams have raised, major large gifts that have come in, and again, the goal and their progress toward goal. So that's a nice example of a crowdfunding site. So the same considerations come into play if you want to do a peer-to-peer, a fundraising event. Probably you'll be most successful if you already had one scheduled and then decide to move it to a more virtual setting and have people, how are people going to participate virtually? But for crowdfunding as well, what's the ease of use with the platform? Do you have the volunteers in the donor network to get this up and running? If you haven't had an event like that before, then Amy, your notes are on the screen. That's okay. So if you haven't had an event like this before, it's probably a tough call to try to start off this way, but it doesn't mean it's impossible, but it is definitely something to think about, because both peer-to-peer, as the name implies, and crowdfunding are dependent on getting key volunteers and key donors to help get the word out and to participate. Same, your case for support goals, how you're going to steward your donors and thank your volunteers, or things that you'll want to have figured out as you conduct these events. Okay, so these are some resources that I think we think are really helpful. So Hubbub.net is a great digital fundraising consulting firm, and they have some really great free information out there about considerations to make when moving an event to a virtual venue, or for crowdfunding, or for peer-to-peer, or for Giving Day. They have great information out there. Also, if you're specifically interested in looking at peer-to-peer platform options or crowdfunding platform options, those are two websites that have some great information and vendors that do those things. Okay.
So now we're gonna,
go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, now we'll open it up for some questions. Thank you, Wendy. We also wanted to talk about, here you see our current resources page again is available. And yes, this slide deck will be shared for those of you who are wondering. We also, here at BWF, we do have a digital fundraising team led by our colleague Justin Ware, and it's called Groundwork Digital. So happy to provide training or any needs that you that may be of interest. We have a great question that started out. The question was if these examples of these events happened before quarantine. And yes, this was during a time, obviously in Seattle, with it being one of the first places where COVID hit. That event did take place during a time of social isolation. So as you see back on that slide, it had to do with everyone being 6 feet apart. If that in your particular city is an option, I have seen that happen with live bands performing 6 feet apart, administering social distancing. So that is of consideration. I have seen with examples, a great example with Stars in the House is that you do have quarantined families. So there are the opportunities to partner with celebrities that actually happen to be married to each other and are stars. And so that would work in a quarantined environment, or, but I have, there are some options if you're dealing with a quarantine. We have a couple of other questions. Any advice for broad-based alumni events that are not fundraisers? Ways to engage people with relevant or interesting programming and content with little or no budget and limited or no video meeting experience. Wendy, do you want to tackle that?
Sure. So that's a great one. I don't have any specific things right off the top of my head. I do know, I guess it depends on what kind of event it was going to be. You know, if this is a replacement for a reunion, or this is a replacement for some sort of other, donor recognition event or something like that. I think that's where if you have content that you can repurpose videos or things like that and schedule a virtual event and kind of make it a giving day at the same time, although if it's, you know, if it wasn't necessarily a fundraiser, I do think that's a challenge. What are some fun group activities that people could engage in and feel like they're participating? And, you know, there's Zoom, which a lot of people have been using. There are other ways to have video meetings and live meetings. And so some kind of fun activity and fun thing for people to get together online and celebrate whatever it is, your virtual reunion or, you know, your virtual homecoming, you know, wear your school colors and show up and, you know, whatever. So those are some things that it's never going to be exactly the same, right? So it's just what sounds like a fun, engaging thing that you could still get people to be involved in.
I would also echo that. And my alma mater, Ithaca College in upstate New York, they actually are hosting a fun run. And it is a broad-based alumni fun run where you can run at your own pace. You can record your time. And they actually, if you register early, I mean, they actually did provide some discounts on your time to promote a registration. So there's some really great, you could do some races that involve that interaction. I had looked it up. It looked like they had about 320 people, over 320 people that had signed up. So you might consider like a fun run, like a 5K. And it was very limited digital expenses. It looked like it was a web page that I saw. Yes, this video will be hosted on our current resources page, as you see here, bwf.com/current resources. Give it a couple of days before we put the video up. We have another question regarding stewarding donors. Could you provide examples of online activities you found very helpful in stewarding donors? Wendy, I'll have you start.
Okay, so I've had some folks who have either discussed doing this but haven't done it yet or are planning on doing it. But, you know, depending on what it is that you're trying to steward, whether it's a scholarship, you know, gift, having some sort of way to have the student interact with the donor online in a context that you can still maintain some privacy. Then also having, if it's stuff like somebody has named something, like having videos of campus or other, you know, areas of the grounds where you can say, here is, you know, the video of, you know, the X building where you named a room, or, you know, you named the building or whatever. I've had people that want to do things like that so that donors can go in and virtually see what they've helped create.
Some interesting things I've seen is campus tours, online virtual campus tours. So that's an opportunity for stewardship. In the art space, I've seen some, in the culture space, some live feedings of animals at zoos and private opportunities to have, you know, virtual visits. The thing to keep in mind with stewarding your donors is bring it back to your mission, bring it back to the impact that your mission has, and tie it all to your mission. So whether it's students writing handwritten notes to your donors, your major donors, you can even, some other online activities involve, you know, just private interactions. Say you're a ballet company, and I'm just thinking of the arts right now. You could put your major donors in contact directly with a virtual meeting with one of your resident dancers, and you know, just always bring it back to your mission. Okay, and then do we have a question from our perspective? How long do we anticipate that we should prepare for no fundraising events? I know there's not a crystal ball, but what is the conversation happening amongst our team? Wendy, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I mean, I can just tell you what I have seen people doing right now is fall. everything's being deferred to fall. If they made a decision that an event could not be virtual, or how long do they have to be virtual before they can start having in-person stuff again? What I've typically been seeing is the fall, because they feel it's still iffy whether June or July will be out of this yet. So fall is safe.
That's what I'm seeing as well, is people have not started canceling fall events yet, but they're starting to plan and reimagine what they can look like. So, you know, there's considerations of, I've had earlier conversations of luncheons being reframed as like as a virtual giving day. So those are things that you can have conversations and start planning now. And then it's always good to have contingency plans. Okay, so we have not a replacement. This is a great suggestion, just trying to create ways to engage. Examples they are considering at this institution is Arts in April virtually, information resources, federal and state, that they can provide for small businesses, a sip and draw. So thank you for Laura for offering those insights. You know, another really creative thing, a way to steward donors. I received my husband from a vendor received an Omaha Steaks package. So think of some ways, some different ways that you can send over food or dessert, whether it's Tiff's treats or, you know, different creative ways to send over different things to your major donors, and just to make them feel special. What's the best way to host virtual events when a main crowd is of an older generation who might not be tech savvy? Well, the phone, you know, getting people on the phone. Now hosting the virtual event, yeah, you'd have to get pretty creative. What you could do is offer to help them set up the virtual event for them, or get on the phone and walk them through the process of what it's going to be to host a virtual event. I would say that our, you know, the Facebook generation is slightly older now, and so you have a lot of grandparents checking up on their families and grandkids on Facebook, and they're starting to get a lot more savvy when it comes to FaceTime. But a good way would be maybe get on the phone with this older donors. Maybe do a conference call and try to work with them to set up the virtual event, or if there's someone in their home that could help them with it. Moving a spring event to the fall without losing momentum to reach goal is the question. Wendy, you want to start?
Yeah, I think there are definitely some events that they're just not gonna translate to a virtual venue, you know, especially when they're more community based. It's like whatever your nonprofit day is at some fair or festival or whatever, and it's you know, the community shows up to help participate, and some of the proceeds may go to your organization. That's really hard to replicate as a virtual thing, because it really was an event that you were the beneficiary of. And so I think that things like that, it does make sense to move some of them to the fall so that they're still on the calendar. You can reassess later if things have not gotten better, but at least it's, you haven't, you know, scrapped it completely, and you can still keep an eye on it and start coordinating it so you have everything in line for the fall.
Yeah, and just being sensitive as you're reaching out to these sponsors and donors, but I mean, they're going to understand with timing, and just keep in mind that these donors want to help. They want to make sure that your organization is has business continuity and is thriving. So just over communicate with your donors and funders, and you know, it might be a relief. It probably will be a relief for some of them to know that there's a bit more timing as things settle down. And I have seen that be quite successful, that people are moving their spring event to the fall, and it just gives you more time to make sure that you are reaching goal, and to also be creative with how you are going to host it. Because you may decide, coming out of this, we may see that we want to not only host in-person events, but these events will also have virtual options as well increase a larger base. What's an appropriate timeline to run an online auction, culminating in a giving day, live streaming auction, and a fund in need? Our organization is set to host a gala on May 13th. We're talking about opening auctions on May 1st, but this participant's a little worried and concerned about losing momentum. You want to tackle that, Wendy?
So I think it depends on how much stuff you have, and I can understand the concern. I think you want your stuff out there early enough that people go look at it and get excited about it and want to go back and check and see if anyone's outbid them, but if the time frame is too long. So that sounds like it's a little over a week. That to me doesn't seem unreasonable. So I think it's one of those things, you have to try out, and you can also be sending out reminders to people. I've seen other people do this where they had an online auction. So there's the initial, hey, we have our auction items, please, but every couple of days, hey, people are bidding, make sure your favorite thing doesn't get away. You'd probably need to have an ongoing communication to make sure people don't forget about it right before the event.
And I wanted to address our next question. Do you have another peer-to-peer fundraising example of other 5K walks and runs? Yes, there's an organization that I'm personally involved with called Every Village here in Houston, and they have moved their 2020 Run for Radios as a digital event. You can pick any day to run or walk a 5K in your neighborhood, or to complete 4,000 steps at home. Post on Facebook, Instagram, a selfie of you finishing the 5K or a screenshot of your stats with the hashtag Run for Radios and why you did run, and then challenge your friends to do so. So, and this is a small institution, so I think a lot of this does translate. We've also talked about the idea of, Wendy and I discussed the idea of a virtual golf tournament. I know Top Golf, I've seen Top Golf with their virtual golfing software. So there are some virtual golfing opportunities. Look at virtual gaming opportunities. Can you do some gaming that is raising funds as well? And then it looks like our final question, we can take maybe one more question after this. But are there any concerns that when flu season begins in the fall or winter that we might be in a similar situation? I think it goes back to contingency planning. I think the more prepared you are for any kind of opportunity or challenge, it will allow you to make sure that you have a plan in place. So I would say it doesn't hurt to plan your current event as well as your digital event, and see how they might be able to weave together. Wendy, any other thoughts?
No, there was a question over here on the chat that just swag take-home items is a good way to connect with your event attendees. I think that's a great idea. If you have a bunch of tchotchkes and branded whatever pom-poms or t-shirts or whatever, and you want to have everybody have their stuff with them and wear the t-shirts and have the pom-poms and whatever other stuff that you have, I think that's great to send that out to participants ahead of time so they can all show up with their stuff.
Yeah, and we had another comment here on the chat. They're sending Cheryl's cookies with notes to let folks know that they're thinking of them and sending cookies amidst the chaos. I think these are all wonderful ideas. And just in closing, this is a time for us as fundraisers to harness our creativity. Look at yourself as a fundraising artist. Put your heads together, be collaborative, think outside the box. And this is just a wonderful opportunity for you to grow the digital plans for your institution. Any final thoughts, Wendy, before we close out our webinar?
No, I think that, well, after all of this, I think, everybody's going to be more engaged in digital stuff. I think once this is over, though, everybody's going to be relieved to be able to get together again. So I don't think in person anything is ever going to go away completely. But I do think this is going to become more of a way of fundraising or getting people together, you know, when we can't do it in person.
And one thing to think about is that, you know, our donors are being greatly affected by this, and this kind of disruption will cause disruption for the way that they interact with us. So I would not be surprised if our donors do want to continue with digital engagement and virtual engagement beyond this. So we just have to think about this time, how it's going to affect all of us, put ourselves in our donors' shoes, to know what they're going through, and then just be sensitive. Again, all our resources related to COVID are at bwf.com/current resources. We are here to be of support to you if you need any help, any fundraising assistance. We are a full service firm, and we have global and national clients, and we are all across the country. So we are here to help you in this time of need. Thank you so much for attending. We're so glad that you were able to join us, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.